Well, hi. Um, Gonna talk about the total toxic burden with organic acids. I did this a few days ago, and apparently everything was blank for some reason. So hopefully it will work this way. It appears to be working, um, and it appears to be moving. Okay, so this is a total toxic burden from Vibrant Laboratory, but many labs do a total toxic burden. In this case, the total toxic burden consists of a mycotoxin test, a heavy metal test, an environmental toxin test. And this is a sample report, so it's not an individual. And all of the tests will be extremely high because this is just the sample report, and they wanted to put all of the commentary in it. So the test comes with a summary. And the first thing I do when I'm looking at one of these tests is I just count the number of highs and the number of lows. Now, in this case, it's going to be every single thing, so that's not going to be that helpful. But I count all the highs and all the lows, or all the highs and all the moderates, I should say. So here's, every single thing on the test is high. So that's not that helpful. I probably should have just done a different type. And then there's, in fact, and then after you've seen the summary of the highs and the moderates, so high means above the 95th percentile. 95th percentile means that a person is carrying more of this toxin than 95% of the population. Moderates are above the 75th percentile, which means that a person is carrying more of that toxin than 75% of the population. So that's the meaning of moderate and the meaning of high. And then for everything that's on the test, there is a little commentary. And on this test, it's going to be every single thing. So we're not going to go through all of these. But it'll tell you about the background. So this aflatoxin happens to be a mycotoxin, a mold toxin. So it talks about what it is, possible sources, contaminated peanuts, maize, or rice, and animal products such as meat or dairy. Inhalation of dust, generally during handling and processing of contaminated crops. So foods that are destined for human consumption are often treated differently from crops that are destined for livestock production. And it is the livestock production things that are much more likely to get contaminated. And so when we eat those animal products that are, fed the bottom of the grain crib where it's a bunch of mold in there, that's when we can pick up these toxins from the meat or the dairy. So anyway, there's going to be a bunch of these, and it's going to talk about the background, the associated risks, the possible sources, and so on. And unfortunately, I chose the wrong demo maybe, but every single one of these is high. So this is going to be the world's longest summary. So I'm going to skip through the summary now that we've showed you what the summary is really about. And then I'm going to get to the actual list of mycotoxins. So this is the actual list of mycotoxins. So there's the aflatoxins, and the aflatoxins are listed here. The others are listed in this section, and then triglycines. And you learn from the summary above, that's where you dive into each one and learn what it is. Next on the total toxic burden is heavy metals. So here's the heavy metals. And again, because this is a demo of everything high, it's going to show in the summary every single thing on the panel. But again, it shows us in the summary possible sources. So aluminum exposure occurs primarily through ingestion, inhalation, and dermal contact. Common sources include contaminated food and water, aluminum containing medications, antiperspirants, and occupational exposure such as aluminum smelting plants and construction sites where aluminum containing metals or materials are being used. Associated risks, talks extensively about that. Detox suggestions, talks about what kinds of products might be helpful. So here's antimony, detox suggestions again, and so on. So again, every single thing on this test is going to be in this summary because it's the high demo. So I'm going to skip through all of these and take you down to the list of things that they check for. So normally what would happen is there would be maybe 2 or 3 or 5, things in the summary, and then the entire list would be here. And I just want to show you that they're checking for aluminum, antimony, arsenic, cadmium, lead, mercury, all of these bad things all the way down to uranium. So then the next thing in this test is the environmental toxins, also called persistent organic pollutants, or POPs. So again, because this is the high demonstrator, every single environmental toxin is going to be in the summary. Normally it wouldn't be. Normally there'd be 3 or 4 or 5 or whatever. And it would then tell you again about the background, the associated risks, the possible exposures, and detox suggestions. So really within the test, there's always going to be like, where did this come from? Your patient is going to say, well, where am I getting this stuff? Well, there's 2 answers to that question. The first answer is right here where it says possible sources. But the other answer is we live in a toxic world where babies today are born with more than almost 300 identifiable industrial chemicals in their umbilical cord blood. For adults who are not detoxifying well, sometimes just normal environmental exposure is enough to cause them to have very high amounts, and they don't have any obvious exposure beyond just the normal environmental exposure. So they may have these exposures, but when you look at this and they go, no, I don't have any of that stuff, it's probably because they have inefficient detoxification pathways. So we need to think about how we're going to manage toxicity. And we talked about that extensively in other lectures. So anyway, this is where you get on all of these, whether it's the mycotoxins, the metals, or the environmental toxins, this is where you get a deep understanding of what's going on. So again, there's a bunch of these, but I'm going to skip through all of them, and I'm going to give you the whole list, show you the list, because normally what would happen on one of these tests, and this is a long way down here. Normally what would happen on one of these tests would be 3 or 4 things in the summary, and then we would have, here we go, we keep going. And then we would have the environmental toxins list. So, like maybe you would have just bisphenol A. So that would be up in the summary. But nanophenol and triclosan would be normal. And then maybe you would have one herbicide, like maybe glyphosate, and the others would be normal. So only glyphosate would be in the summary. But as you can see here, what do we have? We have environmental phenols. So BPA, that's in almost all plastic. The only plastic is not in are the ones that are labeled BPA free, and that's not very many plastics. Triclosan is in a lot of stuff. It's a preservative used in cosmetics and toothpaste and hand sanitizer and all kinds of stuff. Herbicides, 2,4-D is part of Agent Orange. Atrazine is an herbicide, and atrazine recapturate is a metabolite of that. Glyphosate is Roundup. Then this mitochondrial marker tells us if your mitochondria are working efficiently. And then we have these other markers that when you look at them in the summary, it'll tell you more about them. Parabens are toxic in their own way, and it talks about them in the summary when they're present. Pesticides. This is DDA, is a metabolite of DDT. DDT hasn't been used in the United States since 1974. And so when you see this elevated, and I see it commonly, when you see this elevated, it suggests probably imported food or maybe some kind of strange environmental exposure from, it's sitting in the environment. Some of these are, excuse me. Goodness. Some of these are organophosphates. Organophosphates were really developed during World War II to be nerve gas agents. And somebody noticed they were killing bugs on the battlefield like crazy. So they thought it'd be a great idea to spray this stuff on our food. But they're nonetheless nerve gas agents. So phthalates are used in a ton of products. They're also preservatives. They carry fragrances. So if you're looking at the ingredient list and it says fragrance, it probably has a phthalate in it. Volatile organic compounds, these are another set of environmental toxins. And again, when they're abnormal, they're going to be up in the the summary, and it's going to tell you all the things that we've looked at already. So this is the total toxic burden. And what that means, basically, sun's coming through my curtains. I didn't notice that I'm striped. Well, what it means when you see this is, what do toxins do? Toxins just dim down your physiology, right? You have a toxin, and then when it rises to a certain level, we call it poisoned. But that doesn't mean that it's not doing anything when it's below that. If this is the threshold of poison, if you have this much, it doesn't mean it's not affecting your physiology. It says that when it rises above this level, it's affecting your physiology to the point where we name it, you're poisoned. So it's down here, it's still affecting physiology. It's making your physiology less efficient in some way. And so I'm gonna tell you my bias. My bias is that the ills of modern man, especially the walking wounded, they're stress and they're environmental toxins. And I broadly categorize environmental toxins as the exposome, everything you're exposed to that you're not handling efficiently and properly and well. And so in that instance, this test is very helpful for those people who just don't feel well. And there's no obvious other reason. They don't have an obvious infection. They don't have an obvious disease. They're just among the walking wounded who just they're not thriving. You do this test, you find the 3 to 5 that are high, you find the 5 to 10 that are moderate. You figure out how to clean that up through all the detox pathways that we've been talking about. And they just feel better. All right, that is the total toxic burden in our discussion about it.